Well, a warm welcome to you all from the Root and Branch Core team, wherever you've joined us from, and whether you've been with us before or whether you're new. And if this is your first time, we hope that you'll decide to come back often. As Mary said, please say hi in the chat and let us know where you're from. We're pleased to be a community that operates right across the UK and internationally. And today, our meeting is closely connected to something we're going to talk about a little bit later on this evening, one of our core threads, taking action. And in a moment, Sue will introduce us to Reverend Christina Rees, our speaker, who we're so pleased is with us to talk about what would equal look like. And of course, in a mathematical context, equal to is represented by the symbol that indicates that the expressions on either side of that symbol have the same value. And in a societal context, equal can and often does refer to the concept of equality, where people have the same rights, opportunities, and value. And we know that women and men are equally valued by God. So, what would equal look like? Christina, we're so looking forward to your insights and to the questions and discussion that will follow. But first, though, Kevin will introduce a moment of silence, and then Sue will introduce us to Christina. Thanks, Kevin.
We come together wherever you are, not just to speak with each other, but more to listen to each other. So I invite us all to sit in silence with each other for 2 minutes. And let us see that true silence is not just about an absence of noise, but it's about an internal state of being. It's about a spiritual space where one can encounter truth. One can encounter the divine. We can encounter ourselves. And importantly, we can encounter each other in this space that is between us now online. So in the words of Thomas Merton, let us listen now to the voice that does not speak. I invite you all to just gently come back into our meeting, and I will hand over to Sue.
Apologies for my blank screen. My computer's not behaving, but I would like to be able to, so pleased to be able to introduce Christina, a privilege, because for many years she's led the campaign for women's ministry in the Anglican Church and has given outstanding support to those of us campaigning for women's ministry in the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, several of us were trained by Christina and her husband Chris to use the media as a way of getting our message across. We have never forgotten that training. Christina's talents are many. She is a writer, broadcaster, speaker, and preacher. Currently, she is Associate Priest of St. Peter's Sheringham in Norfolk. She is also the director of the Litim Oi Foundation, a charity supporting Christian women with educational grants in the majority world. Litim Oi was the first woman to be ordained in the Anglican Church, and this was in Asia. As a member of the General Synod of the Church of England, Christina was a leading campaigner for women's ordination, both as priests and bishops. Christina's campaigning also continues for the ending of discrimination against women in the worldwide churches. Christina's writing is on contemporary Christian spirituality, women and religion. Her books include The Divine Embrace and Feast and Fast, Food for Lent and Easter. Although an American citizen, Christina traveled extensively as a child. sailing in a small wooden boat in the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean and Mediterranean seas. In many ways, this gave Christina early insight into different cultures and peoples, so that she became an ecumenist at a very young age. Educated to degree level in the States in English and Performing Arts, Christina came to the UK to gain an MA in Women in Religion at King's College London. Having been ordained as a deacon in 2021, Christina was ordained in 2022. In 2015, she was awarded the CBE, Commander of the British Empire, for her services to the Church of England, which includes being an honorary fellow of Ripon College, Cuddesdon. We were fortunate to have Christina with us at our Root and Branch Synod in Bristol in 2021, sharing the international contributions along with Mary Ring. Christina also delivered an inspiring input, which I'm sure will be replicated this evening. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Sue, so much. And it's wonderful to be back with Root and Branch. And it is so exciting to know the spread of everyone who's here tonight. And for us in some parts of the world, it is tonight. But I am aware that for some of you, it's wee early hours of the morning. And so thank you especially for joining. I think Root and Branch has done just the most amazing work in bringing people together. And I really want to encourage you and praise you and just say how wonderful you are and all that you have done and all you have achieved, even though the overall goal of reforming Root and Branch, the Catholic Church, has not been accomplished. But to me, that's just an ongoing work that will take many, many years. But what you are doing is you are raising up a community within the church and also with like-minded friends like myself who want to walk with you. And so all power to your elbow, Godspeed, Root and Branch. And thank you very much for having me. My talk is entitled What Would Equal Look Like and sort of how to get there. And this is something that during the campaign for women priests and particularly for women bishops, we had to deal with, because people would say, well, what difference does it make? And what you know, women just want to be like the men and get to be ordained. And I know that Root and Branch's agenda is huge and much wider than just allowing women to be ordained, allowing all clergy to be married, etc., etc. I know it goes very deep and it is truly Root and Branch. But at some point, when after Watch had been formed, which stands for Women and the Church, we had a large agenda. We had 10 goals. And we finally thought, you know, we're going to focus initially on women bishops. This was after we'd already gained the vote for women priests, and that was in 1992. And then 2 years later, all the ordinations took place of the 1,500 women deacons who'd been waiting, some of them for many, many years. And they'd been waiting as deacons, as deaconesses, as pastoral workers, and whatever they could do. They'd had a call that there wasn't even a name for when they got the call. So this is a long process, I think, in all the Christian churches. And it is not a quick win. And if I can speak just very personally for a moment, is one of the things, and Sue mentioned it, growing up on a sailboat from the age of 5, and we finally left sailing and went back to land when I was 15. It covered a span of 10 years, even though we weren't on the boat that whole time, is that those experiences gave me a kind of resilience. and a kind of ability to stick with things when they were very, very rough. And that stood me in very good stead when I was on General Synod in the Church of England. And I know we have other members of General Synod present and past here tonight. And it still does, because when you're dealing with an institution and you're taking on tradition, the status quo, power, and in the case of the Church of England, it was also the establishment, and also taking on perhaps our biggest challenge, which is the ideology of patriarchy, which permeates so many societies, so much of our thinking, and it's in the air we breathe. And one of the things I would like to do is to call out that invisible specter at the, the invisible guest at the party, patriarchy, and say, what could our churches look like? What could our communities of faith look like and feel like if we didn't have this underlying ideology of patriarchy driving what we all do? And this goes for men very much as for women. Patriarchy has particular damaging effects on women, but it also has hugely damaging effects on men. And while it may be the case that the most common cause of death for women in Britain and Europe between the ages of 18 and 45 is to be killed by a man she knows, the most common cause of death for men in Britain and Europe between the ages of 18 and 45 is to commit suicide. And you wonder, what is it about our societies, our privileged, by and large, affluent societies, where a sweet boy grows up and decides to end it because he has not been equipped with the emotional resilience to deal with what life throws at him, and many other things. So one of the ways that I think we can tease out what would equal look like is to ask some questions. And some of the questions I asked and other people asked during the debating years in the Church of England is about maybe what God thinks about what equal would look like. And one of the questions that actually stumped some of those who were opposed to women's ordination is, does God have a different relationship to women as God has to men as men? And if the answer to that is no, then why are we trying to dictate? Why are we being the church, by and large those in authority, overwhelmingly it is men, but also we found out in the Church of England that it was some of the women who had leadership qualities, who'd been repressed and grew up in families and were educated and were formed in churches where they were always told, no, you make the tea, you can't get up and preach. You organize the Sunday school, but you don't organize how the church is run. And they were some of our most vocal opponents because their whole identity and validity depended on the patriarchal mold that they had been formed in. And what we were doing and what we were saying and the vision we were offering was hugely threatening to them. And a few could break through, and it was a most painful experience for those women to suddenly realize that all their lives they had bought into a system that actually didn't like them, that kept them down, and they became liberated. So does God have a different relationship with women as God has with men? Does God value males and maleness and masculinity more than God values females' femininity? Does God value clergy? We're joking a bit earlier about clericalizing women and how now that argument is being used against women. Oh, we don't want to ordain you lovely creatures, because we don't want to clericalize you. Yes, exactly. They don't mind clericalizing themselves, and the higher up the church ladder, the more they're clericalized and the happier they are. Also, does the Holy Spirit give gifts based on our sexuality? And if not, how does the Holy Spirit give gifts? What is it based on? What is the distribution of spiritual gifts based on? And then last but not least, did Jesus himself treat men and women differently on the basis of their sex? And the answer to that is, of course, no. You can read through the whole Gospels, and not once did Jesus patronize a woman, flirt with a woman, or do anything else. Let her off the hook. Poor dear. She's had a tough life. Think of some of his encounters, the woman at the well, the Syrophoenician woman. And he was as robust in his encounters with women as he was with men. Jesus is an interesting person and character to look at in terms of how we move forward and the nature of how reform takes place. And just to touch on this is that Jesus was overwhelmingly compassionate and kind to people who were oppressed, in need, needed healing, were poor, and who were desperate. But Jesus had a switch that could be flicked when he was dealing with people in authority, the religious rulers, and when they were oppressing other people. And if you look at chapters 23, 24, and 25 in the Gospel of Matthew, you see a very different kind of Jesus and how he deals with those people as opposed to how he deals with the people who have nothing, don't know, desperate, in need. And his woe to you, you scribes and Pharisees, woe to you whited sepulchres, woe to you. And so one of the things I wanted to say in how you move, how Root and Branch moves, and how Root and Branch and other organizations is to be aware of the times when it is appropriate to be that restrained, moderate, eminently gracious kind of person and organization, and when it might be appropriate also to take a leaf out of Jesus's book and be really, really tough on the people who are oppressing other people. Because if someone has power and does not want to share it, that in itself is not Christ-like. So I would say, what does equal look like? Equal looks like that if someone says, this is how it is for me, this is how I feel, that first of all, their voice is heard, they have a place, if not at the inner sanctum table, they have a place in the community where they can be heard and where their views are certainly able to be looked at. So one aspect of is equal is that voices are heard, and we know that traditionally only certain voices have been heard, and certain attitudes and certain perspectives. And I do want to just mention one is that we all can pluck the awful quotes by people like the wonderful Augustine, who was wonderful in some ways, and Origen and Tertullian, and so many of the early church fathers, and they said some of the most appalling things about women because of their patriarchal upbringing and their absolutely androcentric views. But I wanted to say that in 1935, after the issue of women's ordination, and I know this is just one of the issues that is up for reform, had been discussed at the 1920 Lambeth Conference. And the Lambeth Conference is a meeting of bishops in the Anglican Communion worldwide that meets once every 10 years. And it had met it in 1920, discussed it, absolutely not. Of course there couldn't be women's ordination. 1930, absolutely not. Of course not. And so in 1935, the then Archbishop of Canterbury pulled together an Archbishop's Commission and asked them to look at the theology of women's ordination and could this happen? And they talked about all sorts of things, but their findings, what absolutely settled it, is they said, well, women are not suited really for this kind of work. Women, also because of their sexuality and their lower sexual drives, this is what was thought, they can handle having a male priest lead holy worship because they don't fancy him as much. And the theological conclusions that this Archbishop's Commission came to is that they said, we do not believe it is possible for the average male member of a congregation to be present at a service at which a woman ministers, and this is the killer quote, without becoming unduly conscious of her sex. Translation: the men are going to fancy the women, and what would happen then? Women can control themselves, men can't. They would stop thinking about God and start thinking about sex. So we absolutely cannot have women as clergy. End of. That was their theological reasoning. Now, I don't want to go over my time. I think what I'd like to do is open for questions pretty soon. But I'd like to end this initial bit with saying that it's so important to get the theology right and examine what does equal look like in the eyes of God, and how do we share it, and to become aware of our own unconscious biases. Because unfortunately, none of us have been raised in rarefied air that is free from patriarchal assumptions and attitudes, and where we do not have to deal with androcentrism every day of our lives. And thank God, more women and men are becoming aware of this and calling it out, but it must be called out. And then also the context. We have to analyze the situation, because in any situation, who's got the power? How are they behaving? If asked for something, reasonably, graciously, and in a Christian manner, how do they respond? Because sometimes people in power cannot even treat other Christians like Christian. And I would say to Root and Branch, what have you done already that has succeeded? What have you tried to do that has failed? What else can you do? How can you go around, like a river or a stream? How can you go around that huge boulder? And also, can you analyze the things that need to change for you to succeed? So what is the context? Who's got the power? And do you want to just take that power from them and share that same power? Or are you seeking to reform the very nature of the power that the people currently in power have? Because one of the things that we became very conscious of in the Church of England is we did not want women just to be identikit male bishops and priests. We wanted them to be able to exercise their priestly and episcopal ministry in their own way. So what does that look like? Because the strong current and tide is that everybody just suddenly starts behaving the way men have always behaved. And so look at the very nature of the power that you are trying to change and to share and to spread out and broaden, because that in and of itself will probably not be the kind of power that you eventually want. Institutionally, you may have to get to certain positions, but it's not the kind of power that you want to share as equals. And last but not least, the vision. And Root and Branch has a wonderful vision. But I want to leave you with just this bit, with just some things to think about. And one of the things I'd like to ask is, what would you attempt now if you knew you could not fail? And I remember asking this in Bristol at the first in-person and around the world synod. What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? And I would like you to think about that in terms of the movement, but also in terms of your own personal lives. What would you attempt in your life that you feel called to do or longing to do if you knew you could not fail? And then we need to be able to articulate what equal looks like on our terms. And so if we say that the miracle has happened, what does that look like? What does equal look like? And I hope we'll have a discussion about it and we can get back to maybe some more of the characteristics of what equal look like.
Wow, goodness me. Thank you so much, Christina. Am I being heard, Peter? I am. Terrific. Well, open to the floor, and the very first, Penelope, welcome. The first hand in is John Rosebank. John, unmute and fire away.
Hi. I can't hear.
Unmute, Penelope.
Sorry, hello, Christina. One of the things people say to me at times when we want women's ordination in the Catholic Church, and we as you said, we want it in a different format, but you can't which will come first, we don't know. We can't change the church as well as everything else. But people say, well, Anglican women have just become the same as the Anglican men. What percentage do you think have not? Because I mean, I know some really wonderful women priests and bishops, but I mean, do you think can you put a percentage on it?
I've never thought about putting a percentage, and it's wonderful to see you, Penelope and John. I'm glad you could make it. We were aware that for the first number of years, it's been 10 years since women could be bishops and 31 years since women were ordained as priests. And some of them very, very quickly became just like some male counterparts, and perhaps not even the most gracious, loving, gentle kind of clergy. But we do see women who are doing it their way. And if I had a percentage, I would say probably certainly more than a quarter, more than a third, but maybe not quite half, are doing things, possibly a half are doing things their way, and they're bringing their own identities as women and their femininity and their insights. And of course, we want to stay away from all the stereotypes about, oh, women clergy will be this, that, and the other thing. And so I think quite a few women are now putting their stamp. And I have to say, some of the younger women coming in who have never faced a moment of pause between knowing themselves to be called to ordination and being able to be trained and following through. And they're just themselves. And they're much, much more relaxed about the role, a lot of them less formal. And I believe they're doing it. So maybe it's as high as about half, but so many of the women who'd been waiting, they had no role models. And so they, I think, had nothing to follow but the men, and it pulled a lot of women in.
Thank you, Christina. That's fascinating because I'm sure a lot of us have encountered those very points. So thank you, Penelope and John. Really valid. Martine, I see you're waiting, but and Olive too, but I think, oh, okay, Peter, thank you since you've put Martine, but next we must not overlook Paula Blake, who has a question from the chat. But first you, Martine, all yours. Lovely to have you here.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Okay. I was really intrigued, Christina, by your question about what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And well, you know, what I would like to do if I couldn't fail would be organize a strike. I mean, I feel the thing that upsets me, and still very much in the Church of England, without looking to the Catholic Church or other places where the situation is far, far worse, women are just horribly exploited. Our churches are hungry for our labour in all kinds of ways. In the Church of England, we're 2/3 of congregations, and yet they absolutely refuse to give us what I would say the protection or the dignity of equality. And you know, this power imbalance, it's not just unjust, it's unsafe. And what astounds me, I know that patriarchy is the air we breathe, but, you know, it astounds me how much women put up with this exploitation. You would feel that in almost any other sphere or situation, people would go on strike. I mean, they need our labor. Can you imagine, even if for one Sunday women downed tools and said, do you know what? You get on with it today. We're staying at home. I mean, you know, obviously we don't want women to exit the church, and I'm not suggesting that. But, you know, our labor is so taken for granted. So anyway, I just throw that out there.
Well, I love that idea.
It's not going to happen.
And history is repeating itself because we fantasized about that idea way back when, during the campaigning years. And we thought of the Greek play Lysistrata, where the women sort of went on strike and wouldn't have sex with their husbands to bring them into line. And we thought, what if, and just exactly what you've said, Martine, one Sunday, not a month, not disrupt, but one Sunday,
Well, you
no
know,
woman would come out. And then we opted, and I'm sure some of the others who were on Synod with me, who are here tonight, might remember this, that we said it would be so disruptive. And we felt that the perils, the PR perils of how the opponents would use that were greater than the benefits of people seeing how absolutely devastated and bereft the church would be. Not only people in the pews, but all the ministry already being done by women. and just the whole thing, the whole volunteer world of women. So
Yeah.
maybe, you know,
Oh,
maybe.
you know, next year, International Women's Day, the 8th of March, is a Sunday. Just saying.
Well, who knows? Who knows? It might work now. I have no idea.
But I just can't see, like, I mean, how do women on this call feel about that? They probably feel like, oh, I couldn't do that. Yeah, it's so difficult, yeah. But, you know, if we never say, do you know what, we're not happy about this, then how is there ever going to be change? Yeah. But anyway, over to someone else.
That's absolutely fascinating, Martine. Thank you. There you are in the sunny uplands that are not so sunny to us over here in the thank you. Really interesting. Paula Blake, would you like to pop in with your question? And then Olive will come to you next.
Yeah, just a very quick one. Thank you very much. I'm really enjoying this evening. I'm a layperson from a church that doesn't believe that women are equal and doesn't believe in watch either. So a very quick one. The thing I come up across and I have difficulty in answering is, well, God chose men for his disciples. So I welcome any comments on that. And I'm really enjoying this evening. Thank you. So just a quick one there.
Thank you, Paula. Lovely.
This is such an important question to be able to answer, because that was one of the things we are asked all the time. And we tried to explain that in the historical context, Jesus's closest group of men, and he sent them out in 2 by 2 and all sorts of things like that, that it had to be men, but that when you look and you read the Gospels closely, you do see that the women were there as well. And that there were a few, you know, not only Jesus's mother, Mary Magdalene, and several other named women were also there, but that we don't quite understand whether they went everywhere or not, but they were certainly part of it. And at the key times, it was the women who were there with him and for him. And also post-resurrection, the women were definitely in the upper room, because some of them, you know, are named, and also and the women. So I think it's reading the Gospels, looking for where the women are, and they are there. And also, again, how Jesus treated women, and some possibly pragmatic, practical things in sending out the male disciples 2 by 2. But Jesus didn't establish the kind of system we have now. He established the church, which is the body of believers, and charged Peter with that. But nowhere did he say, I want a male hierarchy, and I want to distinguish between femininity and masculinity and this and that. That was the early church. And it is important to note that things that were changed after half the time in Christian history, priestly celibacy only came in the 1100s, and it's now been knocking around for about 1,000 years. Well, it can go again. And we know why it came in is that also it was very much easier to move men and deploy men who didn't have families. But also at that time, the prevailing Christian view was so anti-women. And I could talk for hours about what was going on, and the violent anti-women and anti-sex attitudes that men had. And I really think, don't ever underestimate not just the church's attitude, but individuals' attitude to women as women and women's bodies, and also towards sexuality in general. It really has damaged generations of Christians.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Christina. I'm just going to put a lightning quick observation into the screen for you, Paula. I hope someone will pop this into the chat if I don't get the chance. It's Mary and Early Christian Women, Hidden Leadership by Dr. Ali Katous. And I hope one of the team will pop that into the chat. We found it very useful in Root and Branch because she homes in. All the written texts can be redacted and changed and have been over the years, but Ali homes in on carvings, stone, solid things that have simply endured across the centuries. And I think you'd find it absolutely fascinating, Paula, if you're
Thank you.
defending it to
Yeah.
people. Thank you. I shouldn't have done that, but I'm glad I did.
Thank you.
Olive, you're next.
Thanks. Two comments. First, on the question of women being clericalized and have they changed things in any way. Back at Christmas, when the row about the Smythe report came up, and what sitting on the outside, but my other half's very involved in the Church of England, so there was a lot of discussions around the table about it. It was noticeable how the men bound together, and it was Bishop Helen up in Newcastle who said resign, and that was the first bishop to break ranks, and it made a huge difference. We don't have female bishops to break ranks about the problems our bishops are causing. Right, that's the first thing. You asked us about something that could be successful. We've recently yet again had our annual prayers for vocations in the vast majority of parish, i.e. priests. But I went to an all-girls school and we were taught that everybody has a vocation, and part of our duty as Christians, as Catholics, is to discern what our personal vocation is. And something that we might win, a winnable battle would be that all vocations would be seen as valid and equal, they discussed with us, the nuns did, the religious life, married life, or single life. Okay, ordination wasn't an option. I would like to see that when we have prayers for vocations, it's not assumed we're talking about the ordained vocation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Amen to the whole vocations thing, because the clericalization in certainly the Church of England and the Catholic Church renders most laity as lesser beings, and it just doesn't need to be that way. And being ordained is a vocation along with other vocations, and it's not superior. It is not superior. It is a certain kind of vocation. But try telling that to anyone, and if you look at the dynamics and the power dynamics in churches of just about any denomination, you will see that that's not what people actually believe. So here to discerning each and every one of us our own vocation over and above following Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Does that do it for you then, Olive? Wonderful.
Thank
Super.
you.
I'm going to do Julie, followed by Margaret Mary, and then I'm going to ask Nicholas Postlethwaite to come in and put his question live to Christina, because I think it's a fabulous one, and then Mary and Eleanor will come on to you. So Julie Bowen, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you ever so much for what you're sharing with us, Christina. Really, really helpful. Going back to what you said about does God have a different relationship with women as women and men as men? I've asked that question to many men, and I get a resounding yes. And when I ask them to explain, they tend to say things like, well, Adam was created first, and Eve was created second, and she was there to support him, and you can't argue with that. And so, I'm just wondering if you can offer us any other reasoning we can offer to others.
I most certainly can. And it's something I learned a few years back that really helped me. So if we look at Genesis 1, we see that absolutely beautiful, completely equal creation of male and female by a God who is God in community, they and them. And that's beautiful. And we cling to that. And that was blessed. Then we have the sort of the more detailed creation story of God sort of forming a mud pie and making Adam. Well, what I was told by a Jewish rabbi, a female Jewish rabbi, a Reformed Jewish rabbi in New York, is that at the time that Genesis would have been written, that it was believed that God was the male sort of sky god, and Adama was the earth, the earth god who was female. So basically, we're seeing a human being being formed out of a feminine earth, and then God breathing life into this male. And the whole thing about putting Adam into a sleep, and nothing was quite right for Adam, and then the rib and everything. And it was the word used was a helpmeet. Well, the Hebrew word for that is ezer, E-Z-E-R, ezer. And that word is used, I don't know whether it's 14, about between 14 and 20 times in the entire Bible. And in every single time, that word that was translated helpmeet and that has kept women down for all these years is only ever used about God. And the meaning of Ezer is a meaning of the Ezer is a protector, a strength, someone who looks out for the man. And so instead of this little put on your pinny and serve me tea kind of helpmeet, which it became and was used as a stick to beat women with, it is actually, I am your protector. I am your strength. I have your back. I watch out for you. I and you are one. Totally changed my attitude.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you.
So exciting. So exciting. There's so much bad interpretation and bad theology. And we need to have, you know, and Watch certainly did, short little papers and occasional papers that we you know, we didn't have the internet the way we do now, where we took a subject and wrote maybe just a couple of thousand words about it and offered it. And I think that would be very good. You know, why only male disciples? What does help me really mean? And various other things that can undo some of the hugely damaging theology that's been laid on women for so many years.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Julie, does that help?
Lovely. Thank you.
Wonderful. Margaret Mary, and then Nicholas Postlethwaite, I'm hoping to come to you. Margaret Mary, thank you so much. Great to have you here.
Thank you. I'd just like to add two things. And one is I think we're not failing in all our reform groups because we already are bonding as brothers and sisters and we love each other. And we're working together as men and women. And we've done webinars and we've gotten to know each other. And I think we have to continue doing this because we have committed relationships. And I'd like to say that our married couples, we have to promote marriage more and have our married couples speak about their love for and their commitment to one another. Because I work with so many young people and they're always asking me, even the young men, Miss Moore, can I find a good woman who really wants to make a family and to be together? And young women are asking the same thing. And then when Christina brings up about domestic violence and the single mothers, that's a problem all over the world. And yet we cannot fail because we're living the gospel. And I just rejoice in all the married couples that we have here that I've worked with in all the different reform groups. It's just outstanding, the relationships, and all the single people. Myself, I have private vows. We can just rejoice in that and keep going. And I think we need to put out more programs, more webinars that invite our young people in to see what fidelity and commitment and sacramental marriage is all about. And then secondly, I'd like to say, I think we need to get close the seminary system. It's been an incubator of pathology all over the world and infantilism. Jesus made us to live together. He made us, gave us covenant relationships in marriage and in whatever vocation to be faithful to the gospel. And I would advocate for centers for theology and ministry, postgraduate centers, not seminarians, where men and women, married and single, come together to answer God's call, that are trained together, live together, work together, pray together, heal each other, and go forth to make. We can't fail. It's God is asking us to do this. And then thirdly, on vocation, everyone has one. Everybody is called by God. We're all God's children. So there should be no hierarchy there. We should be striving to help everybody be their best self. And what is really sad is to see the poverty and the murder, Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, taking away the future of so many of our young people. And I think it's up to us to try to partner with Pope Leo for peace and justice. And following, he's put down his gauntlet, calling himself Leo the 14th. And I think we get behind him. We cannot fail.
Well,
Thank
thank you, Margaret Mary. And it sounds like some of what you were saying sound like a prayer that people who love one another, and I would say whether they are married or whether they just have this love, that they can express it and show it and include other people in their relationship, because so many, that's what we're all looking for, is love that we can trust. And the confusion that so many young people have about relationships and the damage that has been done by so many things, not only the teaching in the church, but online porn, what that does to young, malleable minds is just awful, and how it's damaging relationships. So I think anyone who has a truly loving relationship needs to widen the circle and show that. And so thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margaret Mary. Really super. Nicholas Postlethwaite, are you able to come in? Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't expect to be. Can you hear me?
Well, I thought your comment was well worth everybody hearing.
Well, I want to say, I come to all the Root and Branch presentations that I can, because I feel very at home here. I've loved your presentation, Christina. I love what Margaret Mary was saying just now. We need to love one another. And I go back to, in a sense, what Kevin started us off on at the start. He said, let's just have 2 minutes where we allow the voice that doesn't speak to speak to us. And I think that's at the heart of what we're all talking about. But I suppose the question I was trying to ask is that, is there a risk that there's always a deeper question, that we sometimes we get caught up in the question we're asking at the present, with all its validity? I'm not in any way knocking that, and we need to challenge the inadequacies of patriarchy. We need to challenge all the bad theology. I accept all that. But is there a deeper question? I don't know. I'm not sure. But we're presuming that all our questions are couched in terms of the church. We're all using the word church. And we're presuming that Jesus started a church. Well, I suppose my question is, well, did he? Was he in fact starting a movement? And have we in fact translated that movement into very different sort of versions down the last 1,000 years plus? And is church the best place to actually start asking the question? Does the language of church whether it's of priesthood, whether it's of, all the hierarchy, whatever, which is, it totally needs to be sort of challenged. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, but is there a deeper question? And are we being pushed in the world in which we're living at the moment, where we don't know where we're up to with Trump, with Putin, with Netanyahu, with so many others? Is the nation state sort of holding together? Is what's happening to so many people in the immigrant movement, the mass immigrant movement that's happening, the lack of power in people's lives, is that pushing us to a new question about how we hold together as human beings, men and women? And should we be sort of trying to focus our questions back to Jesus, back to the silence, back to the God who we don't immediately hear, we've got to struggle to hear? Is that the question we're struggling with? And while in no way dismissing all the various points that have been made tonight, going back to what Margaret Mary just said, how we continue loving one another, but at the same time say the question is deeper. And what is that human, how do we hold together as the human race in the ongoing pilgrimage through the desert of today, as Jesus, as God took the people through the desert in times past? How do we find God in that time? I'm rambling now, but I've enjoyed the conversation so far, but I keep feeling there's another level. And are we prepared to risk going to that other level? I'm sorry for going on, but thank you for the opportunity for sharing.
No, thank you, Nicholas. I think you're absolutely right about not thinking that the church is the be all and end all, because the church is, on one level, the human institution that is so flawed and has got it so very wrong for so many years. At its best, the church is the body of Christ. And so what I hear you asking and what I'm sensing, and right now it could be said that our Anglican Church is going through a slow-mo car crash implosion. When the Archbishop of Canterbury has to resign, when the widespread clerical abuse is not addressed properly. So much is happening. And, I've had friends say to me, well, maybe the Church of England needs to die and be dead for a while before it can be reborn. And I think what you're getting at is, I think, back to Jesus's new commandment, which is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And I would say that this transcends the boundaries of course it transcends the boundaries of individual denominations, Christian denominations, but I would say it now transcends the divisions of faith. And that I'm sure you have had the experience of being in the room with people of different faiths and finding more of that immediate bond and looking into someone's eyes and knowing that they are a true brother or a true sister on earth, that there is something between you that is undeniable, that is loving and good, and they may not even be Christian. And so I think what we're being called to do is to follow Christ in a more raw, immediate, do it as we see it way, and get away from our tidy little programs. And I'm not putting down programs, but what I'm saying is that the world is in a new kind of mess right now, with some pretty important things being challenged. And so I think we have to find our allies and get back to showing the radical love and boldness that Jesus showed while he was on earth.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Christina. I suspect that resonates very deeply. Mary Varley, I'm just going to make a point, my friends. We have 10 minutes left of Christina's precious time and 4 people queued up. So may I ask that we keep our questions really to the point, and we'll try and get 4 people into 10 minutes. Mary Varley, you're first.
I hardly want to follow that discussion, but Christina mentioned, for me, the ultimate abuse of power, which is clerical abuse in all its forms. And I'm thinking in relation to sexual abuse in particular. If we look outside of the church, one of the most protective factors is having women look after children in relation to sexual abuse. And I wondered if there's any information anywhere about the difference that women being in positions of power might be making or have made to the clerical abuse position.
Thank you, Mary. I think there is some research on that, and I cannot put my fingers on it, and perhaps someone on here tonight can, but I know it's been found that when women are in the lead positions of authority, that it is a deterrent to clerical abuse. And it's also been found, and this is true not just for the church, but for the corporate world, that when women are introduced into board meetings or they're the CEO, that the whole behavior of the board improves, and not only is it better behavior by enlightened human standards, but actually they're more effective with women and men, and in the business world the bottom line is even higher. It actually spills over into a profit. So I think that there is clear evidence, even though I can't quote where it's been done, that that women and men together are better, certainly, than just men, and women have a very good effect on stamping out really awful behavior.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to try something really quick. Thank you, Mary. Such an important question, and forgive me hurrying, but Eleanor, Barb, and Kevin, would you each like to just state your question, and then Christina, you have about 5 minutes to come back to them.
Okay.
So, Eleanor, tell us. Wonderful to see you from the other side of the world. Thank you. You need to unmute, Eleanor, and then the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. No, I'm actually in London at the moment.
Oh, wonderful.
I was really going to talk about the women's strike, but I noticed people have put it in the comments that a lot of women couldn't cope with striking, not turning up to mass, not turning up to church, because I think they've been clericalized. In our group, we decided that enough people didn't think they could strike. So what we did was encourage all the priests who would allow us to have women preach at Catholic churches. And so that was we decided to do something positive. And there is a bit of evidence from Adelaide in Australia some years ago, when they had a very enlightened bishop who had women all through the system, that there was less abuse in that diocese.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's exciting.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Barb, coming to you.
Yeah, I think one big problem, whether we look at the Catholic women's strike or just trying to share these types of ideas, a lot of people really agree with what has been discussed like here today. But the big problem I find here in most dioceses in the United States, and I hear from people in other parts of the world, is communicating that message to get some organization, collaboration among people, because we really don't have an effective, unified voice of communication. And, you know, we can stand out in front of a church and sort of have our signs or, you know, distribute flyers. Sometimes I even leave flyers in the hymnals, leave some, you know, papers in the pews just to try to spread the message. But we really need a global unified communication source that can really amplify and collaborate what we're doing. And I think a good example is like the environmental movement used to be a lot more fragmented, but now people are coming together and it's sort of made more of an impact. And I think that's really needed within the global church today.
Thank you, Barb. If Christina can hold that in her mind, and we'll just ask Kevin to come in with your question.
Yes,
Kevin?
these days a lot of people are leaving the organized churches and personalizing their religion, personalizing their Christianity and their faith in so many different ways. I wonder what are the ways in which we can reach those people so that we can get feedback from them as to what it is that keeps them moving. What is their faith? They seem to be so isolated and hard to reach. There's a certain number of people who will come to events like this, and that's really wonderful. But the great majority of those people of faith who are not connected with any church are just out there somewhere floating. How do we reach them?
Sorry, Kevin. Are you? I
Yeah,
didn't.
I'm saying, how do we reach them?
That's really important, and everyone's been listening to that very good question. We first of all have to find out who they are. We have to make friends with them, and we have to talk with them. And there's no, because by their very nature, if you said, oh, please come and would like to talk to you about this, they're not going to. So I think that is a slow thing of gaining trust and being a true friend to them. There's no shortcut to being interested in what they believe and why they stay away from the institutional churches.
Thank you.
And Barb's point about our looking for a unified voice.
Well, the exciting thing is the era we live in with all the technology and the internet and the WhatsApping and everything. It can be instant, and we actually now have the technology to communicate with one another in a matter of seconds around the world. I think what it is when who agrees, who gets to be the person to post the message. And I'm not sure we're anywhere near having just one group being sort of elected as the spokespeople for everybody. So I think groups have to be faithful and carry on doing what they're doing, but then possibly it might be the core teams of various groups recognize each other, get to know about each other, and then start to liaise more closely. And it would knit together, I think, quite organically after that.
That's fascinating, isn't it, in terms of structure and possibility? And Eleanor, any comment that you want to come back with for Christina? Okay. I've hurried you along, and now I find we've actually got 2 minutes left. Anybody like to put a hand up and get the last free 2 minutes of Christina's amazing time? Just Christina Rees from New Zealand. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I just want to make a response to about the question about synodality that I've see coming through the chat. People are saying it's not been mentioned, and people saying, "Oh, I haven't heard of it in our diocese" or anything like that. I think we need to take off our clerical garbs and patriarchy that we've just been talking about, and actually just do what we've been commissioned to do now through this whole consultation period. We're now in the implementation period. We can just do it. We have the authority to be able to go back to our communities, get a group going and say, what does synodality, what does church, where is the Holy Spirit calling us to be church in our own place? In addressing the status of women is obviously a key, really important question that, we can do and we should be able to do. And, answering that question of what can we do? We can change this and we have the authority to do it. And we've got the documentation from the finals, from consultation on synodality to be able to do it. We don't have to wait for our priests or our bishops to do it. And if they get upset about any of it, well, we invite them along to come and join us. And if they get even more upset and want to excommunicate us, well, they can go off in their own tangents and we'll just keep being the church that we want to be. There we go.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Mary,
It's been wonderful.
is there 30 seconds left?
There are 60 seconds. Oh no, they've just gone. But hey, overrun, Christine. Take what you need, lovely.
I just would like to end my input by reading the first few verses of Hebrews chapter 12 for all of us.
Lovely.
Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm going to hand over, and I hope Mary Varley is touched with the wings of eloquence, because I would be speechless myself. So Mary Varley, over to you to thank Christina. All yours.
I'm speechless. Christina, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your sociological, psychological, theological insights born from really hard, tough work over a long, long time. There are so many things that I could point to in what you said that personally impacted on me. But there are just three things that struck me really importantly about how you've spoken to us tonight and the difference that it could make. And I think one is the quality of what you said can be seen in the quality, the amazing quality and wisdom in the chat. It stimulated an enormous, important debate. So thank you, Christina, and thank you everybody else for the quality of that chat. Then the second thing is the questions that you left us with for going forward. They can keep us busy for the next year, for the next 5 years. I mean, how am I going to go around the boundaries? What am I actually, why have we failed and what have we done that's failed? But also, how are we going to see success and be determined that we will succeed? I think we could have some really fruitful community. Or are we a movement? Question mark meetings. And then the third thing was your thoughts about power. And although there may be questions under that, I'm thinking about the way in which we use power is such an underrated and unspoken about question. From the everyday microaggressions that I see priests behaving, even priests who think they're sharing things, to the other end of the continuum, clerical abuse. So you really made us think about the importance of analysing power, and that power isn't just confined to clerics, that we need to think about how we as a community and as a movement exercise power. And the comments that you made and other people shared, Christina just ended with, we just do it. We need to develop our analysis and our practice of the way we use power. So those are just 3 things off the top of my head about what your talks meant to me, and I hope to everybody else this evening. So big thanks for coming and joining us.
You're so welcome, Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now it's over to Mary Varley to carry on, and just want to tell you a few things that you might find interesting. And the first of those, Peter, can you show the slide, the vision slide? We've been thinking about, in the core group, we've been thinking about where we've come from and where we're going to. And we realised that we needed to change our vision statement because we're moving towards creating something different. So we've expressed this in our vision statement, and just take a moment or two to read it, because the key messages are we're creating something different. But we want to follow Jesus's message in the ways that Christina mentioned about how we reflect equality, inclusion, and justice in what we do and what we say. And where Christina talked about really listening, I think the word Christina used was, what does an equal look like? That voices are heard. The other theme is welcome, that anyone is welcome in Root and Branch. And the third theme is, again, it links to what Christina said about resilience and about having to be tough. We must empower ourselves, and now's the time, and we are the people, and we know there is another way. So we wanted to share that with you, and we'd welcome through hello@ any comments or responses or thoughts, ideas about how we might deepen that vision statement. It'll be on our website very, very shortly after we've shared it with you this evening. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second is we've been thinking about next year, and we're thinking that next year we probably can manage to do an event every month. But we wanted to think about, if we're a community, if we're a movement, if we're moving forward, then what are the themes that we need to consider? And this is what we came up with, and we're pledging really to develop talks and activities next year that reflect these 5 themes. One is a different vision, and that's a different vision around theology. And again, connecting back to Christina, really understanding a new theology of priesthood of everyone. Finding our voice and empowering ourselves is another theme. Breaking silence, that reflects our pledge to stand with people who've been silenced by the Catholic Church and continue to offer people like Anna, who came earlier this year, the missionary of Charity Sister, and the sister from India who's experienced such terrible abuse, which is continuing, offering religious, priests, lay people, I hate using that word, but you know what I'm saying, don't you? The opportunity to tell their stories, because sharing stories is such a powerful way of becoming a stronger and deeper community. And then taking action, contemplation, silence, and action. Thinking about the things that Richard Rohr writes about, that it's contemplation in action, and that many of us will be acting in the world. And I just think back to that discussion that we just had about finding a new way of being in the world, and the things that are happening in the world that are just new to us and just appall us. We as Root and Brand can't just look inward, we have to take our part in the world. And then lastly, thank you. I can't remember who called it Holy Huddles. Hard to say that. But it's a good title. We want to develop our prayer and spiritual life. And we're thinking about ways that we can do that meaningfully as a movement and as a community. So there might be some new ideas coming through there. Again, if you've got ideas, let us know about them. So over the next year, September to July, you'll expect to see those themes. And our first talk, actually, it reflects quite a few of those themes. It reflects taking action, it reflects empowerment, and I suspect too, it might reflect a theology, because we wanted to celebrate 10 years of Laudato Si, and it's about getting on with saving the planet. And we're delighted that Barbara Wilson is going to join us. Barbara's a long-standing and well-known activist. And as we've said here, we want to talk about how we as a community and individuals can play our part. Because if we don't do this, there won't be a planet, will there, for us to actually reform? We won't be here. So we're very much hoping that you'll be back with us on the 11th of September for our first talk. And over the summer, we'll be developing the rest of the programme, and there'll be more interesting things to tell you about. Okay. I want to move on now, and Rhiannon is going to talk about how Root and Branch got to the tablets event. So Rhiannon, over to you.
We were very welcome guests. Thanks. I'll just be a second, because like you, Mary, and Mary Ring and others, I'm still drawing breath. Not quite speechless, but still drawing breath. And there is so much to say about this extraordinary day that was so recent. I noticed that quite a few of our friends and colleagues, several of our friends and colleagues who were with me in Boreham House on the 11th of July are here on this call. So that's great. Good to see you again. Well, this was an event called Leadership and Legacy, the Future of Women in the Church. And it was convened by Newhall School in Essex and by the Tablet, which we know and we're good friends with. And it was aptly named because women at the forefront of ministry, of leadership and mission were at the heart of every talk and every discussion, and doubtless many, if not all, of the informal conversations. And Christina, you were talking about the ideology of patriarchy, and that definitely came under the spotlight, was scrutinized, in fact, for what was quite a long day. And I don't think it's too far-fetched, because you never know, when you go to these things, quite what you're going to meet. Best not really to have too many expectations, but I don't think it's far-fetched to say that speakers and guests and everybody were on fire for equity. Quo, which is, as you know, Catholic Women's Ordination UK, and Root and Branch, as you said, Mary, were invited to come along and bring our materials and bring our banners. We were warmly welcomed by the hosts, and we met, and it was delightful to meet other friends from Quo and from Root and Branch, and to network with many other people. Very briefly, and this is hopefully just a taste, because I've written a little text which I'm happy to expand either for one of our newsletters or for our website. We'll point you in the right direction once I've written my expanded text, because I took reams and reams of notes. But the keynote was someone, Christina, who'll be well known to you and doubtless many others here, Reverend Lucy Winkett. She's the long-standing rector of St. James Church, Piccadilly in London. And it is, as you know, as I'm sure most people know, certainly people who live in the UK know, that it's a church with social justice at its core. And Lucy's formerly a chaplain at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. And she was ordained about almost 30 years ago, first as a deacon in the C of E in the Church of England, and just a year later as a priest. Now, very briefly, Lucy reminded us that while we may carry self-limiting beliefs, as she called them, around with us, God doesn't, which is a theme that you were exploring today, Christina. Lucy said more than once, several times, that the Spirit blows where she wills, and she reminded us that we, women and men, take inspiration from Saint Teresa of Avila. Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. And she said this very emphatically, that when women lead, families, communities, and economies flourish. And lastly, about Lucy, she reminded us that when we're called to be the people that God has made us to be, that we are called to be the people that God's made us to be, and that calling is to be fully human. And taking up the point that you made, Olive, and again, Christina, you were talking about discerning our own vocations. You know, Lucy said that this, to be fully human, is our vocation. It's a commitment not to live someone else's life vicariously, you know, by mistake. It's a trap that we can all too easily fall into. And just lastly, there were loads of things went on. But in the there were several afternoon workshops, and I went to the one which was led by Margaret Hebblethwaite, who was a journalist. I'm sure most of you will have heard of her, author and theologian, and she explored the stories of just some of the women in the Gospels, including the mother of Jesus, who taught her son the scriptures, and whose hymn of praise, the Magnificat, is, as we were reminded, a timeless prayer showing preferential love for the poor and the overturning of social hierarchies. And Margaret spoke about Mary of Magdala and a number of other women in the Gospels and their powerful leadership. The day ended with a lay-led worship, which was lovely, with music and liturgical dancing by some of the children in the school, and an opportunity for each of us, this was a lovely thing, to write the name of a woman who inspires us and why on a ribbon. And those ribbons were being taken into the school for the children to ponder and discuss. And the day finished with affirmations, with a final blessing, and a call to action in support of women's leadership in the church. Now, it's likely that next July that the tablet and the school will host not a one-day event, but a 3-day event, and they're hoping for some live streaming so that it is quasi-hybrid, taking forward, in order to take forward the vibrant conversations from the 11th of July. And if you can go even for a day or catch it online, I warmly recommend doing so. It was a stunning event. Thank you very much. And I think it falls on me now to wish you all, thank you, of course, hugely for coming, and to wish everyone in our wonderful community, Root and Branch community, and Christina, you're included, of course, so everybody in our community, a happy and a blessed summer holiday. And please keep in touch. As Mary Varley, you said a moment ago, we will be spending the summer developing next year's theme. So please, feed us your ideas and your thoughts and your suggestions, because we read everyone, and we can always come back to you if we want some more information. Any ideas you have for speakers and so on, please keep in touch, but not at the expense of a good and relaxing summer break wherever you are and whatever you do.
Thank you, Rhiannon. God's first language is silence, and we started with 2 minutes of silence. So let's all come together at the end of this wonderful evening for 1 minute of silence before we say goodbye to each other. So for me and all of us in Root and Branch, to wherever you are, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and hope to see you at our next event.